I care so much about these 12 people that we commissioned and every single person that we interview on the podcast and everyone we work with that, they know their voice is important because they have great music. And we're not just trying to, say, make it the buzzword of,
right.
Oh yeah, like we're diverse. Oh yeah, like we really care about this sustainable inclusion that, everyone really takes a second to reflect on their practice, the language they use, how they talk about these issues, because it's so much more than just the couple pieces you program on a recital.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor. Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults? If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guests for this episode are Ashley Killam and Carrie Blosser. Ashley and Carrie are on a mission. As the co-founders of Diversify The Stand, they have taken on the monumental task of upgrading the state of music education by giving voice to composers that represent groups that have historically been overlooked. Their first major project, Winds of Change, offers a progressive approach to trumpet solo literature, but it's their mindset and teamwork that make them a force to be reckoned with. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I am joined today by not one, but two guests. Yes, that's right. It's a 2-for-1. It's a BOGO today here on the Trumpet Gurus Hang. I'm joined by Ashley Killam and Carrie Blosser. So all the way from the Windy City. So good to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks
for having us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know when, people watch this at all, various times of the day and during the week and things like that. But, I just want to let everybody know that as we're recording this episode, I'm recovering from a gig last night and getting ready for a gig tonight. So I am definitely caffeinating up. And as a matter of fact, here's my wonderful Lancaster County cup. So it's that kind of day. So I am so happy to have you on because, one of the things that I try to do with this podcast, I mean, obviously you have the usual cast of characters, right? These are the names that everybody knows, everybody wants to know more about. But also a big part of this is to give voice to people who are making a difference, that are the next generation of great players, the next generation of great educators, the people that are stepping up to fill the holes that still exist in music, both in terms of the art and of the structure and the society that music is, the world that music is. So I'm really happy to have you two on because diversity is a huge thing to me, obviously, and I think that people who are doing something different and have a different voice, it's so important to give them that opportunity. So let's see, how are we going to start this one? Let's start with Ashley, because Ashley was the first one on, and we'll start with the letter A. And so we'll start in alphabetical order. So why don't you just kind of talk me through what got you to the point that you're at right now in terms of your commitment to music, and particularly your commitment to the aspect of diversity in music?
Yeah, so when I was getting my master's at the University of New Mexico, I took a class there called Female Voices in Composition, and we just learned about women composers. And I realized for trumpet that there was only one piece I could name that I was pretty sure was by a woman, and that was the Pakhmutova concerto. But I wasn't sure because Russian names. And so for that class, our final project was to build a recital for our instrument. So I built my trumpet recital, and I realized I can just do this as my master's recital. So my master's recital was by all living women composers, and that kind of kickstarted just all of the research I've done the past 5 years in, finding all of these great works that aren't necessarily in what we think of the standard canon. And it's a year and a half ago now, a little less than a year and a half ago, I was trying to do some volunteer work with IWBC and ITG. And someone put me in contact with Carrie because she had also asked to volunteer. And so we started chatting and realized that we had a lot of ideas to make some change really quickly. And we wanted to, start an initiative. And it wasn't even an initiative at first. It was just, let's brainstorm some ideas to, make a little change in the trumpet world. And we realized we could start Diversify The Stand and do a lot of commissioning specifically for younger musicians, because a lot of the times when we think of new music, we think, really virtuosic works that professionals play, but we don't necessarily think of younger players and our students that we teach.
Right. Oh, that's a great perspective to have on that. So Carrie, you are, we were having conversation off camera about the fact that you grew up not too far from where I live right now. So, what's your journey has been kind of interesting as well, from going from central Pennsylvania to, where you are now and all the things you've done in between. So, what are some of the experiences you've had that have brought you to this point?
So I did music education through the Messiah College in central Pennsylvania. So Jose and I probably crossed paths, but didn't know it probably for the first 10 years of my professional career, which is kind of wild. So glad to meet you here and hopefully get to meet you in person one day. But I did graduate work in Colorado. Between my master's and my doctorate, I taught public school. So I was a music education teacher. I did 6th grade through 12th grade, all things band in Texas. So I spent a lot of time working with young players, and I think my favorite levels to teach are definitely baby beginners and college students, and kind of that in between and developing trumpet players and all brass students. I taught a pretty large studio in Colorado when I was doing my doctorate there, so I really cut my teeth in teaching, had a lot of really successful students who have gone on to play as professionals. One is a college teacher now, which is pretty fantastic when you get to see students actually doing these big jobs out in the world and taking some of the ideas maybe that you taught them and are teaching future generations, which is awesome.
Yeah.
After I finished my doctorate, I won a job with the United States Navy Fleet Band. So I'm a military musician currently, which is why I'm in Chicago, because Navy Band Great Lakes is just north of Chicago. I transferred here during the pandemic, which was really stressful, and I was doing a lot of at-home recording projects, but the military bands were just kind of at home. So I was looking for a lot of opportunities to volunteer, to kind of do something with all of that anxiety that I had to not be able to play my instrument, to not be able to play with other people, concern for the world. And I met Ashley and we got to talking. I do a lot of the social media aspects of the Navy Band on top of performing. So I learned a lot of kind of that about media and marketing and wording and branding just through my job itself. And we started coming up with ideas of hey, maybe we could let's make some change. What can we do? What pieces are there for beginner students to play that aren't by dead white guys? I couldn't think of anything. And then I realized I spent 20, 30 years only playing music mostly by dead white guys. And I was this has got to change. If I've done it for 20 years, I can do something different for the next 20. So, so we started Diversify The Stand as a business, mostly because we decided we could fund this ourselves, but it would be really expensive. So we crowdfunded and we asked for help from our trumpet community, friends, family, all donated. So we had over 120 people donate to the project. We made it a business, so it wasn't just people Venmoing us personally, because that felt a little shady. Not that that isn't a great thing, but when you're working with a lot of people, taking, having something that's really clear, really easy to understand, and it just felt a little safer to me. And then that way we knew that we're not paying ourselves for this commissioning project. All the funds go directly to commissioning the composers and then creating the book. And we can show you, because our 100 copies just came in yesterday. So we have all of our donors on the back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice. And then all of our pieces. So so you're the first person to really see it in the flesh. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Hey, have this wonderful unveiling, unboxing. It's a big thing now on YouTube. Everybody's unboxing stuff. So Well, let me ask you about well, yeah, I was going to ask you about Diversify the Stand, but you guys already just kind of dove right into it, so it's like wasted no time. I love it. I love it. Um, so the book is um, etude solos that are written for students of what caliber?
So it's a progressive book. So when we reached out to these composers, we had in mind our kind of like breakdown of the 12. It's all solos, trumpet solo with piano accompaniment. Um, we commissioned three composers to write beginning works, which beginning for us was, a year or two of playing, where they can generally play up to like an fourth space E. And then we commissioned four intermediate works, which generally intermediate is like solid middle school player, early level high schooler player that can play up to like right around the G's and the A's above the staff. And then we commissioned five advanced works, which are the more like a solid high school player getting into undergrad players. So it's kind of one of those books that can follow you as you go through your career. And then, I mean, it's not just great for those. These would be great works for professors or professionals or graduate students that maybe want a piece that's not a complete chop destroyer on a recital, or that you can easily take with you to tour anywhere. And they're really fun. They're really, it's nice because the composers we commissioned write and have written and are writing in a variety of styles. So we tried to give them very few guidelines. We pretty much said, stick within these keys for these levels, stick within this range, because we know trumpet range really well. But the rest of it was up to them. And so we wanted their voices heard, and which comes across really great because every piece covers something different. And we have everything from, very lyrical through very technical through more like contemporary. Each one is a little like a new story that players and educators can kind of work on.
Well, that sounds like a great idea. I mean, even with the fact that I know that the driving impetus for this is to give voice to underrepresented composers, but just that whole concept of having this progressive studies, I think it's phenomenal, and I think that more people should. I mean, it should have been done a lot earlier. I think, especially with having some fun with it, and I think especially in the younger developmental stages, it's important to make music fun. Yes, we want to have a challenge, but if it's not fun, why are we going to do this? So having that diversity of stylistic expressions, I think will be interesting and challenging to the student. And Carrie, as someone who's working and working with the Navy and things like that, is this something that you would see yourself being able to utilize, say if you're doing a master class somewhere, or going out and do a special feature in your performance schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these pieces are nice. One, because we're doing everything in-house. We personally know the composers through the process, which is really awesome. So I feel like that extra special connection for me. I'm trying to think of other pieces that I'm gonna, like, if I was to go program a recital tomorrow, like I might just program the whole book and that would be great. But yeah, they're very they're pieces that have challenges, even for like sections of them are challenging for professionals. So I think it would be a good fit to go play with a pianist anywhere on a masterclass tour, or these are just for trumpet and piano, so it wouldn't be a solo in front of like an orchestra or a band piece. That maybe could be a project down the line.
Ah, there you go. I think you're already you're getting ahead of yourself there. So Ashley is like, oh my God, we just got done with this one. Let's give ourselves
it's
a breather.
the other way around. I have all these ideas where I'm like, okay, so this is next and this is next, and Carrie's like, okay, can we launch this book first?
All right. Well, there's always one. There's always one in the group. So
yeah.
So, and speaking of which, I actually was having a conversation with one of my bandmates in last night, and she and her partner, another female, they're both in the band, they run an entertainment company, and we were having the discussion about gender in the music business, and and the ability to work together in the music business, and how sometimes gender plays a role in that, and how it would be more difficult for her. She felt like it'd be more difficult for her as a female working with a male counterpart, because you get that kind of butting of heads. And so she was kind of expressing how the dynamics of their work, and how there's some advantages of that. So do you guys how do you guys deal with each other in terms of delegation of duties, and how do you mesh, how do you become a team?
It was a pretty fast friendship and teamwork for us. I think we're both pretty type A people, but complement each other really well. And I think that's why we've been so successful. Like, we became Facebook friends a year ago, and Diversify The Stand is almost a year old. Like, in 2 months, the business is a year old. Yeah, we just say, like, this is what we need to do, and then Ashley normally does like 90% of it, and maybe leaves me one thing to make me feel better that I've contributed.
Uh-huh.
But she's also got the full-time job. Everything that I'm doing is like fully remote. And Carrie, the one big thing you're doing right now is huge. She's doing all of the finale editing and engraving for the Trumpet book, for the piano book. So I'm like, you have the giant project. I'll make everything survive. But when we started, we like pretty much planned out, the major things that were all involved. Everything from like, the financial to like social media and marketing to what goes into, making a podcast happen. And we delegated all of our little roles for, what our strengths were. And when we eventually, like, we're moving this into a nonprofit, and so, which means we have to bring someone else in the team, and so that just, as we move forward with this, with people we bring on the team, it's kind of adjusting to see what people's strengths are, because the worst thing we want to have happen is give someone, a project that they're not going to enjoy doing, and they don't want to put their time and their effort into.
So where do you see this business being in the next 5 years? What's your vision?
Well, we've applied to become a nonprofit because our like mission and vision and values really align with that. I would like to return to the great state of Colorado at some point. So that is the nice thing with nonprofits, is technically you could like house them in any state that you want. So we're idealist and we love hiking. So both Ashley and her spouse and my spouse, we'd all kind of like to live there or New Mexico. So we're kind of like putting our vision where we physically want to be too, which is nice. But we started with this project, and from this project we have kind of 2 ideas that we want to go forward. It's to take this book and make it for every instrument that it fits with. So like all of the band instruments, maybe mallet, percussion, potentially strings, and see like how that fits. And then we'd also like to start another commissioning project that does a few like kind of like a 3-part mixed ensemble, like duos and trios, again by composers from all different backgrounds, that are for like mixed ensembles, and then have that as like the second collection of pieces again. So we're just giving more access and more opportunity to students, to professionals, whoever, to work on with any kind of instrument in that kind of like mixed ensemble thing.
Yeah,
those are like the 3 big things that we'd like to do.
And I'm sure that if I talk to you again in about 3 months, it's going to be like 20 other things on the list.
The list of what I think that we would want to do is huge. I think those are the ones that we're pretty committed to doing. And part of the way we structured this collection, again, like maybe we're bad business owners. We're bad because we're not paying ourselves for this work. Because it's important to us to get the composers paid. So they're getting a percentage of this. I'm pointing at the book, like people can see me. Sorry. They get a percentage of when we sell the book, they get a percentage of those profits. And then the rest of the money from that actually goes to funding the next project. So we're kind of building in that. So we don't, maybe crowdfunding was great and we had so much support, but we'd love to be able to like internally continue to fund the next projects. So then that way people are focused on like purchasing the book and playing it rather than that huge investment, that seed money to start the next thing. So
right. Well, it's important, you know, from the business perspective to have a self-sustaining, you know, organization. So it's always the beginning. You know, I've started a few businesses over my lifetime, and that you know, first couple of years of just getting to the point where you're not putting money into it, where the business actually paying for itself, and then eventually hopefully be able to pay you. So that's very, very important. So with in conjunction with what you're doing with Diversify the Stand, which link to Diversify the Stand is in the show notes, so make sure you go visit that and you know, support and buy the book and everything like that. But besides the Diversify the Stand, like the concept of doing this book and the foundation of it, which is the giving the voice to the people that in the past have traditionally not been able to do that. What kind of impact have you seen? Because I know you've seen impact already. What kind of impact have you seen as a result of this project?
We've gotten so many emails from various educators and performers to the point that like we wrote a document with with solid answers that we've crafted to send back, just to people asking about, you know, building the LLC and starting the nonprofit, and how you go about commissioning and how you reach out to composers. And this is stuff I talk about in a lecture series that I give. And it's the same thing. People asking these questions on just how to do it, because we didn't really have an instruction manual on starting this. We kind of had to figure out from scratch, okay, what's the best way to commission 12 different people at the same time? Like how do you start that? You don't learn that in, you know, a music degree at all.
Right.
You just kind of have to figure it out. So we've been, giving as much advice and being open books to other people who want to start similar initiatives and projects and commissioning. The two of us have given some different chats with different organizations talking about this, and it's really cool to see just the big change and the big drive for especially younger musicians that are so eager to program new music and to, you know, play more than just the same 4 or 5 pieces. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the second part of my question would be, have you felt any pushback from people because of this?
Very rarely. Every once in a while we'll get something that's like, oh, everything we have is fine, everything's blah, or like, why would you say this? It literally, it's maybe been like 3 times, and it's more towards Ashley's lecture series, like than like Diversify the Stand is. We've had nothing like of that, like, you know, that person, like the Diversify the Stand website and our contact stuff, we've had nothing but really positive stuff. Every once in a while there'll be like a little weird email.
I think I've gotten 4 total since I started lecturing in 2019. I've gotten 4 like angry emails, but that's it.
Well, that's a good ratio. Yeah.
Yeah. Of like thousands of emails, right? Like,
yeah.
But, you know, in some ways, I kind of feel like, especially based on the nature of what you're doing, that having more angry emails might actually be a good thing. And the reason I'm saying this is because, you know, this is a systemic problem. You know, the reality is that, you know, the reason that we need to use these words, I know people get pissed off about, you know, hearing the word diversity all the time, you know, getting so burned out on it. But the reason that diversity is important is because we haven't had diversity. And, you know, if people were actually giving everyone equal opportunity, then we wouldn't have to have these kind of conversations. So the fact of the matter is that there are more people that buy into that old paradigm, that they aren't willing to speak up, they aren't willing to express their frustration or their anger, their disagreement with it. And I think that's where we run into the problem, is because when those feelings are hidden, when those beliefs are whitewashed, then we can't have the true deeper conversations that we need to move ourselves forward. So, on the one hand, I certainly am happy that you only had four bad emails, but I think that's kind of the thing, is that people want to ignore it and say, it's not a big problem. But until it isn't a problem, it's going to stay a problem. So, I mean, when you went into this, were you feeling, I mean, I know there's always the euphoria of like, we've got this great idea and we're going to go, boom, we're going to make these changes. But did you have any level of trepidation of, wow, we could be potentially walking into a field of landmines in doing this? And were you willing, and obviously you were willing to do it, but were you prepared for that?
I think I would say, like, for me, I was more concerned about making sure that I was giving voice to the composers or the people that join our podcast and not speaking for them, right? So, like, as, like, a straight white woman, like, I can't, like, I don't want to speak for someone who has had a very different life experience than me. So the trepidation that I continue to feel is always that I want to make sure that I'm centering those voices and stories and not speaking for other people, because you can't learn about someone else's story from me directly, because it's going to be in my, like, my perception and the way that I tell it. So, like, the program notes in our story and the bios in our book are all from the composers, and that's why the podcast to me is so important, because you literally hear the voices of the people that we're working with. So, like, that for me, that was the trepidation. If someone wants to yell at me, like, they can yell at me all day long. I don't, it doesn't really bother me. And they're like, you don't need to do this. I'm like, that's fine. You don't need to buy this book. You don't need to listen to the podcast. You can unfollow us and you can block us on social media, whatever. That's fine. I'm not really, like, angry people. They don't need this. This book isn't for them. Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
No, you're good. And the same thing, I was much more nervous when I started, like, the first few lectures I gave, because I had just started all of the research. I had stuff to back me up, but over the years, it's that self-doubt of, I am a white woman. Like, can I talk about this in a way that, is true to the people I'm trying to promote, not be just like a white gatekeeper. Because you see, there are these organizations that are trying to, uplift a marginalized group that are founded by some white person, that are led by it, and it's not led in, this very authentic intention. So ever since I started doing the work that I've done, I've constantly been checking in with colleagues and growing and learning and making sure that everything I'm doing is from a place of, really trying to be authentic and to showcase that there are some amazing composers out there. They have this amazing music, but it's not in the sense of we want to tick boxes. We want to, have this tokenism, and just really having these conversations. And I've had a lot of talks with students in colleges across the country just on some of the issues I've seen, the issues I've dealt with, but also bringing in stories of my colleagues to be like, these are problems that people face. I'm not, I'm one person that has one life experience, and I'm not trying to speak for every single person under the sun. I just want to, make people aware of these issues, have these conversations, but continue to collaborate and work with other people. And so that's something that Carrie and I have definitely been aware of. And we check in with each other to make sure, wording is correct, that we're not, inherently and unintentionally like trying to put down a certain group, and that all of the composers we work with know that, they're not just a box, that we care so much. I care so much about these 12 people that we commissioned, and every single person that we interview on the podcast, and everyone we work with, that, they know their voice is important because they have great music, and we're not just trying to say, make it the buzzword of, oh
Right.
yeah, like we're diverse. Oh yeah, like we really care about this sustainable inclusion, that, everyone really takes a second to reflect on their practice, the language they use, how they talk about these issues, because it's so much more than just the couple pieces you program on a recital. It's the lives of so many people.
Yeah. Well, from a social perspective, music is just a microcosm, and so the problems that we face in the music industry, they're just indicative of the social problems that we all face. So from the musical perspective, and we have obviously the world of performance, and we have the world of education, and I think in both, and I'm going to put composition in there as as part of the performance aspect, that there has been kind of this standard view of what is a great, since this is a trumpet podcast, you look at the Mount Rushmore of trumpet, and there's not a female face on there. You look at the compositional side, there's not a female face on there. And I think educationally it's kind of started to shift a little bit, because we do have a lot more really highly respected female educators, but still for the most part, the discussion is always going to be about guys, and generally white guys. So where do you see the change, needing, I know it needs to occur everywhere, but where do you see it needing to change first and most? Is it in the performing side, or is it in the education side?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do some like judging for like the National Trumpet Competition, and I was like the graduate division prelim chair for the last round. I can tell you like the diversity in the performers and the pieces in that was very vast. So I feel like when I like looking at the pool of just huge, fantastic talent from all different walks of life was awesome. So like I feel like performers are coming out of schools in like currently. So I feel like we're going to see a big change in the next 10 years. How do we change now? I think it's really tough, right? Like how do we empower, and how do we like bring and give opportunity to I'm like an educator to heart, so I'm always like, how do we like give students the chance to do what they want, right? Like if this person wants to be like the next, principal trumpet of this orchestra, like let's get them to that point. I think with like universities and orchestras, like tenure is a big thing, right? So you've had the same people that are in those jobs for a long time. So I think as like I don't want to say like the guard, that's not what I mean, but as those positions are changing over, like people are retiring, I feel like we're going to see change in the next 10 years. It's just a matter of like retirements and kind of moving forward in that respect, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it depends on the area. There's small things that can be done for performers or for educators that are easy changes. And a lot of it is just, taking a step back and reflecting on your practice, whether that's like your teaching practice, whether that's how you perform, and just looking at, what you play, looking at the master classes, the clinicians you bring in, what videos you share with your students. Yeah, something as simple as just like, if you're showing Haydn, there are like a billion different recordings you can share. Who are you showcasing? Are you, showing a wide range of people, or are you only showing the same like 4 or 5 big names? Thinking about, I know I am just extra judgy now, But anytime I see like panels for like competitions or for, I don't know, different events and stuff, like when you have panels and they show the panelists, do all those people look the same? Or is there someone that looks like me? Or if I have students, do they look like can, you know, can is it representative of just like society as a whole? Because we all don't look like white people. So, you know, is there that variety in panelists, in performers, in everything? And so that's just an easy thing to reflect on in everyone's practice. And if everyone can take that step and think about it, especially for like colleges. I mean, I remember auditioning and you had to play like either Hummel or Haydn, either Artunian or something else. It was, you know, these two choices. And an easy change that professors can make is just letting students choose their own repertoire. Or for competitions, bring in something of like, now if I were to go back to school, like I'd look for schools that let me choose my own rep, because I don't want to just play Haydn and Hummel again. If I can, you know, live my life and not play that again, that's great. And so I'd be looking for places that allow me that flexibility and put it on the students, because now that we have, you know, younger generations coming up, they may not want to play those same couple of pieces, and we should give them that opportunity and let them, you know, bring in, because then as educators, we're learning from that too. We don't have to know every single piece out there. We just have to keep this open mind and be willing to learn with our students.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's kind of a interesting concept, because I feel like we have this tendency to like want to freeze time and say, okay, this is the epitome. Okay, this is it. You know, the Hummel or the Haydn, you know, the Artunian, you know, this is it. You know, this is the representative trumpet work. And okay, yeah, it's been around. They're great pieces. And you know, it does help to establish a standard in a way, you know, because if everybody's kind of, you know, working the same thing, it's easy to make evaluations of, you know, their abilities. Like when I was a competitive martial artist, I mean, we would have compulsory divisions where you had to do specific things, you know, and then it's easier from the judging aspect to be able to say, okay, well, this person is good at this person is better at this, you know, so those are easy things. But I think in terms of art, when you say, okay, well, nothing written after, you know, after 1860 is legitimate, you know, it's you know, only this is going to be good. Yeah, so it stifles the composers, and then it also really shortchanges the performers, because, you know, if all you're doing is listening to the same old stuff, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not bad mouthing Haydn, you know. Of course, if he wants to come throw down with me, I'll be happy to take him on. But you know, it's not. We're not listening to the same old crap. We're not playing the same old stuff. We're not sounding like everybody else. And I think that your idea of allowing students to be able to program their own repertoire is so important, because you need to find things that speak to you, because the things that speak to you will allow you to perform at your best, you know. So I really love that idea. So any of you educators out there, Ashley has thrown down the gauntlet. Let's look at some ways that you can change the way you approach your students in your studios.
Yeah, I would add one thing too. Like I think about, like, as we're gigging, like, how many times did I get paid to play the Hummel or the Haydn or the Artunian? Never. How many times did I get paid to go sit in a jazz band? More times than the Haydn. How many times did I get to go sit in with, you know, a popular music group and play more? What do I do right now in my military band job? I play in a rock band. I am a classically trained trumpet player, but I made sure that I can play other styles. That's another thing too, is you're like making sure your students see not just like people, but also different styles and where the trumpet fits. Because I think that's the fantastic thing about the trumpet. And we're on a trumpet podcast, so I can be a huge trumpet nerd now, but like, we play everything. We play in every group. We fit everywhere, except for woodwind quartet, because I mean,
yeah, they don't count.
Sorry, they do really don't.
Yeah, our percussion ensembles. Hey.
But yeah, I think that's also like, as educators, that's an important thing to think about too. Like, you know, again, like how many spots are there in orchestras? Not as many as there are trumpet players. Like, where do we gig? Where do we make our money? Where do we find good people to play with? They're in every different kind of group. So
Yeah. Well, and that's a theme. I was fortunate enough to be able to interview Mary Elizabeth Bowden recently, and that was one of the things that she was talking about. Is like, you know, the way that your career path is laid out, you know, traditionally it's like, okay, you're going to go to school and you're going to get your master's, and then you're going to you know, audition and get a job in an orchestra, and that should be your career path. Well, like you said, there are fewer orchestras now than there were, you know, 40 or 50 years ago, when a lot of these programs really began to pick up their credentials in terms of, you know, these are the schools you want to go to for getting into the big times. So there are fewer and fewer opportunities to play in the orchestral setting. Even like in the jazz world, you know, it used to be, you know, you would go out on the road with a big band. There aren't any touring big bands anymore, or very few of them. So you have to, as an educator, or not as an educator, but the educational system needs to reconsider the way that they are programming the curriculum, because the things that worked in the 50s and 60s and 70s no longer work, because the face of music has completely changed.
Yep.
Yep.
Big
So we're all
head
in
nods.
agreement.
We're all in agreements here.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you pigeonhole yourself in one area, then if you're really, really good at this one thing but aren't able to be a musical chameleon, then you're not going to get hired for those gigs. Also, don't show up to a gig that you can't actually mimic and play the style. Like, do your homework. But yeah, it's like, especially after the last like 2 years, right? Like with musicians trying to figure out what, like, how do we keep doing what we're doing? That chameleon style is really helpful as we hopefully get back to safe performances in the future.
Yeah, and you know, it's the you know, so many, especially the older cats. And I'm not gonna put myself in that. I'm old, but you know, I'm not one of the ones that are afraid of technology. You know, so many people have been afraid of technology, and you know, there is no getting around it. You know, as this past past year and a half has shown us, that you know, you need to be able to record at home. You need to know how to set up for a Zoom, and you know, so all of these different things that you know, when I was in school in the early 80s, you know, no one talked about this. Well, you know, the technology didn't exist back then. So, you know, you have to stay on top of things, and you have to be willing to grow and adapt and to change, because, you know, everything around us is changing. And I think this is where we run into problems, is that, you know, like I said earlier, we kind of want to freeze things. We have that little perfect space, and it's like, okay, I'm good now. I don't want to change. I want to keep doing things the same way. I'm comfortable. But if you don't change and everything around you is changing, you're going to find yourself even further behind. So I really applaud you guys for what you're doing in terms of helping to move the conversation forward. Ashley, I know you also have, besides you know, your the work that you joined Diversify The Stand, and your lectures and things like that, you have you're involved with Rising Tide Music Press, and there's a very similar theme there. So what's Rising Tide all about?
So Rising Tide, a former colleague of mine, now my boss, she is this really amazing vocalist and educator and songwriter, Alyssa Jones, and she never really felt like she had a space for, you know, publishing her own works, because she started songwriting after years in education. She started songwriting like later in her career, and it didn't feel like there was, you know, a space for her voice as this Black woman, you know, multiple years in her career. So she asked me if I wanted to help start a publishing company specifically for the works of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian composers and creators in their first decade of writing. And that could be, we have some composers we're working with that are still in school. We have some composers that, are years into their career that just started writing and wanting, their works published. And so it's really, Rising Tide is a space for, to help promote their works. And it's a wide range. We're working with, I think it's 16 composers so far. Everything from solo works through large ensemble pieces. And, it's just a space and a platform to promote their works, to share them with performers and educators. I know we've got some partnerships coming up with more of like the education field for like the string world. It's been really cool. It's working with some really amazing composers who never, had never thought about getting their works published or didn't think they had a space for that. And it's really, Rising Tide is really great too, because it's a no-profit company. So 100% of what the composers ask for, they get back. So it's not like many publishing companies where, the composer gets maybe 5 to 10%.
Right.
They get all of their asking price back, because the point of this is to just help kind of be that stepping stone for them as composers, because as composers, it looks really good when you're published with someone, because Rising Tide's not exclusive. Like, we've had composers who have gone on to partner with other publishing companies, and that's great. And if they want to continue working with Rising Tide, wonderful. We're just another space to help get their music out into the world. Yeah, so that's been really, really cool. And we put on a symposium this summer to just learn and get, have a lot of these conversations and panels with different educators about just the K through 12 system, and talking with the composers, and I led a panel. And so it's been a really cool space to just learn and grow from.
Cool. Well, with the discussions about winds of change, and this current discussion about Rising Tide, one of the themes that seems to keep coming through is like the K through 12, right? Having its progressive book for beginner-ish level, intermediate, advanced players. And I think sometimes we overlook the importance of that group. It's great. I like this podcast. I love doing this podcast, and I love talking to pros. But how do you get the next great player? How do you get the next phenomenal? How do you get the next Alan Bazzuti? How do you get how do you get the next Mary Bowden? The only way you can do that is by starting in that K through 12, and giving these young students an opportunity to play, giving them the opportunity to learn about music. And the other thread about obviously the diversity is showing them that it is possible. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female, white, brown, whatever your gender. It doesn't matter that there's somebody out there that's doing it at a high level and is respected in the industry. And I think that is that's critical for music to continue on and to grow and to become what it really can be. So, is that part of the theme of what, am I just, pulling stuff out of my...
Oh, it's definitely a pretty large theme. I think there's so much power in like when you see yourself in something. Like Mary Bowden and I are a similar age. I still look up to her. She's like fantastic. Like, what a phenomenal educator and performer, and just like the artisticness of her brain is just like fantastic. Like, I want to be her when I grow up. Even though we're the same age. Like,
so do I.
She's fantastic.
I'm older than her, and I want to be older.
I know, right? Like, when you speak, I feel like when I first saw her, I was like, oh, I can do this. I can totally do this. Like, she's doing this, I can do that. And I think that power is all over. And again, the collection is part of that, but also just I can also play pieces and support someone who is different than me and is this person. Like, I can play this, and I can add my, we are each going to play a piece of music like us. And I think that's such a powerful thing. And again, with students, like if you see yourself in the piece or see that yourself on the TV or see yourself on YouTube, like you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then you do it, right? There's no question in it. Until you see that, you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe, oh, I can be, being a pioneer is exhausting. Like, let's stop being pioneers. Let's just give voice and let's just give power to students and be like, go do it. Here it is. Go, here's the piece. Go. And I think that's so powerful. And the fantasticness you get out of that is amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I've alluded to the fact that I'm old, but I just turned 60 this year. And so in thinking about my lifetime and the things that have happened, since the point. I mean, when I was a kid, I can remember the race riots. And I was young, or I was born at a time where I can remember, the fact that as a person of color, that there were places in the United States where I would not be welcome. And there's still places in the United States where I'm not welcome, but that was societally acceptable, and I've seen that change. I've seen so many different things change over the course of my lifetime. And if I and then obviously you just going back beyond that, but it wasn't that long ago that women were fighting for equal rights, and so it's like all these different things that have changed over, if not just our generation, but the generation prior to that. And it's so I was raised being told you can be anything you want, you can be the president of the United States. Well, it wasn't until a few short years ago that I could actually say, yeah, the president of the United States looks like me. And now especially there's been the big thing for women, and particularly women of color, of with Kamala Harris being vice president. It's like, wow, this is somebody that I can identify with, who's in this second most powerful position. I say hopefully, and soon we'll be able to say there'll be a woman president. But there's so much power in that, because you can be told things and you go, yeah, I believe it. But it's not until you see somebody achieve it that then you can go, okay, it is possible. And I'm the kind of person that's like, okay, I may think I can do it, but as soon as I see somebody else do it, like, okay, now I know it's possible. So if they can do it, I can do it if I want it bad enough. So, how do you see yourself in that role, in the role of being the example for people who are looking to make impact, whether it be as a musician, as an educator, or even as an entrepreneur? What do you see your position as being, and what do you want the people that are looking up to you to be able to take away from the work that you're doing right now?
I like to think that, people can see that, if they have an idea, you can figure out a way to make it happen. Because we didn't know, Carrie and I reached out to a bunch of different people and different forums asking, hey, do people have advice on commissioning more than one composer? And no one did. Everyone was like, yeah, we commissioned one person. Okay, well, so have I. So we didn't know how to do this. So we kind of just figured it out. And it's something like that. It's something that's turned into this lifelong mission we now have, that, I mean, it's just part of us. It's not this big deal. But we just figured out a way to make something happen. And so hopefully people can just see that, if they don't see someone doing it, that does not mean it's not possible. And they just have to, figure out a way. And with the younger generation, there's so much more that's out there. In the sense that we talked about, that it's a struggle because there's not as many orchestra openings, there's not as many touring groups, things like that. On the other end, there's all of these organizations and groups popping up because they're filling a hole. And they're just trying something that hasn't been done. And that's allowing a lot of new opportunities to come out of this, which is really cool to see. And hopefully, I hope that, in the future moving forward, that this just becomes standard. If we can teach you know, if Carrie and I can pass on this knowledge to other educators, other performers, younger generations, it just becomes how it is. You don't have to think about, you know, the demographics of your program. You don't have to think about who you're bringing in. It just is. We don't have to, you know, the buzzword of diversity doesn't have to be a buzzword. It just is part of what we do. And it becomes not this big deal when it's just incorporated in everyone's lives. So hopefully I didn't get too far off there. Hopefully that can just become, you know, the standard thing that is just ingrained in society.
Yeah. And that we don't have to be in competition with each other. I think sometimes when there's like one person who has unlocked this one, you know, like if there's a whole panel and one person that's like you're like striving to be that next one person, let's just make the whole thing diverse. Like you're not competing with each other. So I think sometimes, you know, professional jealousy is a thing. So like rather than being jealous of someone else, like celebrate success together and move everything forward rather than like targeting, you know, like I'm going to be like the next, you know, blah, blah, blah of blah, blah, blah. Like celebrate that someone else is that and continue to move forward. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we have our unique experiences and our unique perspectives on things, and I think that you know, diversity. That's why diversity is so crucial, because you know, when we allow all the voices to say and express, then we get a clearer picture of what's possible. You know, so this is amazing stuff. So we've got, before we can close up for today, we've got 3 segments we got to get through. These are my standard segments. And the last one's going to be the most interesting one, because I got to figure out how to balance this between the two of you. But the first one is a segment we call Sound Off, and Sound Off is brought to us by my good friend Michael Barkley of Barkley Microphones. This is a little more about the technical aspect of trumpet playing, and you know, it's about sound. So, what approach do you individually have about developing the right sound for your job? So, and especially I think, Carrie, this is going to be an interesting one for you, because you are in that situation where you are the chameleon, and you know, going from a classically trained player to now, you know, doing a lot of non-classical music. You know, so let's talk about you know, your advice, basically like your advice to people about sound concepts.
Yeah. So I think I start, I think for me the most important thing is in like the morning and my warm-ups and what I'm doing is to get just a really awesome core sound, and like playing like, you know, Stevie Wonder highlights the night before, and then having to get up at 5:15 in the morning like I did yesterday and go play Sousa marches. Having like getting myself back to like kind of a good tone without any grit and gore and like all of that, like, you know, all that sizzle poppy things. So I do a lot of pitch bends and lead pipe buzzing on its own, just to kind of get like a really clear tone kind of in my middle range. And then as I'm kind of chameleoning, if that's a word, to different styles, is I'm making sure that I'm listening to good kind of examples of what I want that sound to be. I do play a little bit of I have a totally different like horn and mouthpiece that I play in my, you know, like in the rock band that I play in. And then I have a different setup for when I do kind of the classical marches, to kind of like a little bit of a different setup for when I play in like brass quintet and solo stuff. So for me, a little bit of change of equipment, just so that the full feeling of the horn is just a little different. It helps trigger my like mentalness of like, oh, this is the sound that I want. But for me, starting my day and making sure that I'm getting back to just kind of like my normal sound, and then kind of branching off from there.
Cool. And how about you?
I'm not a military musician. I actually, to be honest, this past year I took a lot of time off playing, just because of like pandemic, with everything cutting, with everything canceling, that really took a lot of my motivation away on playing. So I spent the past year kind of reformatting things, because I got my master's in 2019, so I've been out for 2 years now. And I had a lot of reflection time this past year, just centering around, you know, my like mental concepts of playing and why I play. And there was a lot of like guilt behind it. Like, you know, when you're in school and there's a lot of, you feel you have to play because you have to sit in a practice room for so many hours because. So I forced myself to take a lot of time off to rework those habits. So now that the book is coming out, this summer, I've spent a lot of time coming back to the horn and making sure that it's from a place of I want to play and not just I feel this guilt if I have to. So honestly, this summer has been a lot of fundamentals, whether that's written down things. I haven't done a structured warm up because I'm trying to rebuild the healthy habits and not get back into a rut of how I was before. So I'm treading very lightly. But it's been a lot of long tones, a lot of lip bends, a lot of things to make sure I'm putting sound first and getting the sound I want and not just feeling I have to play the hard stuff because that's what I was doing before I took time off. So it's been weird because I've never had this much time off, like without gigs and without things. But I think it's been really good for myself to take this time to rework my habits and make sure. So then, you know, when the book comes out and we're putting these recordings out and I go back to live lecturing and performing, that it's in a much better mental space, which I feel if I'm in a much better mental space, that's going to come across in my sound. Whether or not I have the endurance like I did before, I care a lot more. And I know that, you know, I have all of these healthy physical and mental habits.
Right. Well, there's a lot to be said for that. There's a whole lot to be said for that. All right. We're going to move on to our next segment, and this is Geared Up, and this is where we get to be trumpet geeks. And Geared Up is brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. And if you're looking for a mouthpiece, check them out. Use the code TrumpetGurus21 and you get 10% off because we love mouthpiece safaris. That's what we're all about. You need more gear. Anyway, let's talk about gear a little bit. And this is not the, hey, you know, what horn, what mouthpiece are you playing per se, but it's more about concepts of gear. And particularly, you know, as we've been talking about like the K through 12 thing, I think that one of the things that's missing in our educational system, even in college, is people aren't really talked to about how to pick gear, you know? So what are your concepts from an educational standpoint on gear and how to go about finding gear that fits you for the specific needs that you have?
Yeah, I'm very sound focused in, not like I want to get students, especially like, you know, we start with those like the beginner horns and like a 7C or whatever mouthpiece and that sort of thing. And physically children are smaller, right? And this is such a good point, and I'm so glad that you bring this up because I think I was always just handed mouthpieces and told to buy horns, and they're great and they're fine. All of my teachers were very tall, large men. And I'm physically a different size than them. So I think it's such an important thing to talk about in thinking about like picking equipment and picking mouthpieces and horns. Like just remember that your students might be different sizes than you. So you can't just hand them like, you know, like a Bach 1C and be like, here you go, you're the next Bud Herseth, because like they might just be like a, you know, very small, different size person. So thinking about that is a good idea. Ashley and I are very different sizes, so I would not prescribe my same setup to her.
I'm 5 foot tall. I have always been 5 foot tall.
Like from birth, 5 foot tall.
Yeah, I came out 5 foot. And yeah, same thing. I hate this mouthpiece safari hunt because I hate the honeymoon period because I love that it feels good and then a couple weeks later it's like, oh. But same thing, I was always just given stuff, and in undergrad it was always, you know, like the professionals play on a 1.5 or a 1, so like I feel I got to get up to that point. So it was constantly like trying to have bigger stuff, and it wasn't until at UNM when John was like, hey, maybe that's not actually right for you, and we scaled down, and it helped so much because I have this small frame with smaller lungs, which is okay. Like, that's fine. I just have to breathe a little more. But it was something that actually fit me instead of just trying to get me to fit this giant equipment.
Yeah.
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 And also, I don't like the people that, I mean, this isn't equipment. This is like, I guess, body equipment. But the amount of times I've been told to try and grow my lung capacity, I'm sorry, but my lungs are the same. Like, my lungs are the same size. So maybe not going that route and thinking more about efficiency rather than just, I mean, the breathing tools are there as tools, but in the end, like, you can't completely grow your lungs because that's not how bodies work. And so I guess like I've grown into like this educator that works more about, let's use what you have. Let's use, whether it's your lungs or your mouthpiece, if it feels comfortable, go from there and work to make that sound good instead of just constantly being on this battle for the next new thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In the trumpet world, the concept of air, and it's always about more air, more air, more air, as opposed to efficiency. Two of the most efficient players that I know, and these are more from the commercial side, Bobby Shue and John Faddis. And I've talked to both of them at length about some of these concepts. And they both have talked about how as kids, they had some kind of problem with their lungs. And they actually have very, very low levels of lung capacity. And so they don't have full lung capacity. So they just learned how to be more efficient with what they use. And you can't listen to Bobby or John and say, dude, you'd be able to play a lot better if if you just grew your lungs. So
Yep.
it's some of that stupidity that we get caught up in, and
yeah, it's like an obsession, right? It was like breathe from your, like, feel your diaphragm. Well, you can't feel your diaphragm. Like, it's that
It's an involuntary muscle.
Yeah.
It just
yeah. Don't get me started on that. No, but and the thing about the equipment, yeah, you're absolutely right that Ashley, that I've heard people use the analogy of like sports shoes. It's like if if you want to play basketball like Michael Jordan, you're not going to wear his shoes, because his feet a lot bigger than yours, probably. They would probably make you less agile. So to play the same setup with as Bud played isn't going to make you sound like him. And the reason he went to the 1C was because he had scar tissue and he had to have a bigger, after an accent, so he had to have a bigger mouthpiece diameter so that he could actually access the vibrating surfaces of his chops. And so people don't think about that. All they see is, oh, well, this player plays this size horn, they play this size mouthpiece.
Yep.
And I think it's really an intimate process. The horn is an interface for you and your creativity, and it's got to be something that fits you. So I'm with you on that. All right, final segment. And this is the Robinson's Remedy rapid fire round. This is a series of questions that go all over the place. And this is going to be the hardest one to do because I'm going to have to bounce back. So here, I'll let you choose. So I can either bounce back and forth between the two of you, let each of you answer a different question, or I can get answers to the same question from both of you. What would you prefer?
Okay.
Carrie.
Let's do the bounce one.
Okay.
And that way we feel like we're on the same team.
All right. Okay. Yes, because there is a prize.
Oh.
Yeah. Carrie, I'll send you a whoopie pie.
Yes.
Right, and
some birch beer, some Central
birch
Pennsylvania
beer,
birch beer. That would be great.
And some Lebanon bologna. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Ashley's like, God, you guys are weird. All right. So here we go. We'll start with Carrie, since I started the session with Ashley. I'm going to start with Carrie on this one. Carrie, who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
I would have to say it was my grandfather who used to sing me to sleep every night, and I spent a lot of time at their house. And he was a military person from World War II, so he was a pretty strong influence in my desire to want to be a military musician. And he's always really supportive of me. And we used to dress up and like sing little things together. Not a musician, and I think if he lived in a different time, he would have been an artist and maybe like more artistic, but lived in a time where he was like worked for a machine shop. So yeah. I'd say it was my grandfather.
Okay, cool. Ashley, what's your favorite book?
The Red Rising series. It's a dystopian sci-fi series by Pierce Brown.
Okay. And Carrie, what's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh gosh, I can't. I think it was called Bowfinger. It was just awful. I saw it in the theater, and it was just like some weird. It was awful. I can't even remember. It was so terrible.
Is that the one with Steve Martin and?
I think so. Yeah, it was awful. So bad.
Whoa. All right. You try and put it out of your head. Yeah. And for Miss Ashley, if you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Probably, I don't know. I think I would go do something in business or some sort of I would be a really great college advisor with scheduling. That'd be great.
Scheduling. Wow.
Or something with spreadsheets.
Okay.
Carrie knows. I have spreadsheets for everything.
Do you have a spreadsheet for your spreadsheets?
No, but I have them all in nice folders. Okay.
No, we'll work on that one. All right. And Carrie, what's your favorite drink?
I love beer, and I love IPAs. Like the hoppier, the better. Yeah.
Do you have a IPA of choice?
I love the Mercenary Double IPA from Odell's Brewery in Fort Collins, Colorado. That's probably my favorite one.
Okay, good deal. And this is a two-part question, so I think I'll split it up. So the first question is then going to be for Ashley. You're going to have a dinner party, and you can invite any three living people. Any three people in the world can come to this dinner party. Oh, who would you invite?
Oh, that's so hard. Can I have 10 minutes to think about this? I know, rapid fire. You want to do the second part for Carrie? Come back to me. I'm thinking. Probably Simone Biles.
Okay.
The goat. I would love to have Kate Nishimura, our composer friend in Canada. And, oh my gosh, Michelle Obama.
Okay. And Carrie, you're going to join that dinner party, and you're going to bring with you, any three people from history.
Oh, you're just mean with these, aren't you? It's so good. From history. Jeez, Marie's. They can be living though, right?
No.
They have to be dead?
Dead.
Is Fanny Price a weird one? I want to meet Fanny Price.
This is your party. Come on.
Let's Fanny Price.
Fanny Price. Okay.
She can join the party.
She can totally join the party. I'm obsessed with her music in that time period. I think that would just be fantastic. Weirdly, Abraham Lincoln. I feel like that would just bring the party. Just bring that tall hat and stuff.
Pretty avant-garde.
Yeah, just bringing it to the party. Dead white guys. Why am I bringing dead white guys to the party? And then This is so hard. Ashley, how'd you do it so good?
I don't know. No matter what, we'll have a cool party.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm stumped. I can't like think of any names.
You couldn't think of one other person,
No.
not a past musician or inventor or thought leader or military strategist or
Oh, yeah, definitely not those people.
okay.
Let's add Miles Davis.
Miles. Okay, all right, yeah, we'll take that. All right, going back over to Miss Ashley for this one, who's ahead by 3 points.
You win.
Lacquer plated or raw?
Lacquer plated.
All right. And Miss Carrie, what's your favorite quote?
You're so these are hard. I wrote it down too. Why can't I remember? It is by Chica. It's in one of her songs. It's "Kill them with kindness and sound."
Okay, that's good. And let's see. Here we are. I lost track of where I was in my questions. And for Ashley, what is your greatest fear?
Huh. I don't know. Ooh, probably being burned alive.
Mm-hmm.
Be not very fun.
That would be, yes, that'd be very not fun. All right. Carrie, you could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Oh, I'd want to fly.
Okay. And Ashley, what aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Equipment.
And Carrie, what aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most underrated?
Tone.
Okay. And let's see. Ashley, you can go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Do what makes you happy and not just doing what pleases other people.
Okay. And Carrie, what advice would you give your younger self about life?
Budgets are very important, and you're better at them than you think.
Okay, I'm glad you are. And the final question I'm going to actually ask to both of you. What do you want your legacy to be? Deep thought.
It's hard.
Stay still enough. Pretend that you're frozen.
You can go first, Carrie.
Legacy for me, I think about the students that I have taught and are teaching and will teach, and I want something that I've said to them to have made an impact in the way they perform and make them feel like their voices are important and the music that they're making is important, even if it's to them or to their audiences, but to feel really good about what they're playing or what they're doing, not just music, but if something small that I've said made a difference for them or made life just a little bit better, a little bit more musical, a little more. That's what I'd love.
Okay. I hope that everyone that I just pass on that, there's no boundaries you can't crush, and you can I guess I want my legacy to just be knowing that I've, done everything I can to support other people, and hopefully that passes on to, the people I've influenced, so that they can go on and continue to make that difference in musical and non-musical in all of their pathways.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I really thank you for spending time with me today, and want to remind everybody that you can visit Diversify The Stand, support the organization, and if you are a educator or a performer, or you have a young performer in your home, definitely pick up a copy of Winds of Change. It will be released, scheduled release date is November. Is that correct?
Correct, November 1st.
So go to Diversify The Stand, and you can order there, and also help to support the initiatives that Ashley and Carrie have taken on. And the links are in the show notes, so just drop on in there. So once again, just thank you so much for everything that you're doing and for taking your time. This is a great conversation, and I really look forward to seeing you two somewhere at some point. Carrie, maybe we'll see each other at a Turkey Hill somewhere.
Oh, yes. Get some iced tea.
Yeah, so just keep up the good work, and I'm just really, I'm rooting for you. I really am. So yeah, so, and thank you for spending time with us today on the Trumpet Gurus Hang. And remember to subscribe, like, share, ring the bell, don't dent the bell, whatever it is that you need to do to stay in touch with us. And yeah, just keep diversifying the stand. So until next time, peace and slide grease. We out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.